sharing the live stream. All right. So again, we can all chat. So if you have any questions or thoughts while we're in the midst of this, looks like YouTube is ready. So I'm going to start the webinar. I'm going to mute my microphone and go off camera, and then. Oops, so again, we can all chat. There we go. All right, so I'm going to click start, and then we will be broadcasting. So you've got this. Good luck, everybody. I'm excited to hear your content.
All right, welcome everyone. All right, sorry about that. I had a little pop-up on my screen. Welcome everyone. We're just having a few more people join us, and then we will get started tonight.
Muy buenas noches, gracias por estar aquí presentes. Por el momento estamos esperando que llegue el resto de la gente. Gracias por estar con nosotros.
Boa noite, muito prazer em tê-los aqui, bem-vindos a todos. Vamos esperar mais uns pequenos momentos para outras pessoas se juntarem a nós.
All right, good evening, hello, thank you for being here. My name is Lara Villamat, and I am the Head of Community and Outreach Experience at the Framingham Public Library. I just want to welcome you for being here tonight.
Muy buenas noches, hola, gracias por estar aquí presentes. Mi nombre es Laura Villama y yo soy la directora de la experiencia y el alcance comunitario aquí para Framingham Public Library. Bienvenidos y bienvenidas aquí. Gracias por estar aqui.
Boa noite a todos. Eu me chamo Lara Vilmar, eu sou a diretora de experiências, né, uma experiência em biblioteca, e vocês estão todos muito bem-vindos hoje aqui à noite.
Thank you again for being here with us tonight. I'm excited to kick off this event and introduce you to several people who will walk you through the details surrounding the renaming of the Woodrow Wilson Elementary School.
Gracias de nuevo por estar aquí presente. Me anima mucho comenzar ese evento con ustedes y presentarles a ustedes a varias personas que van a repasar algunos detalles sobre el cambio de nombre de Woodrow Wilson Elementary School.
Boa noite novamente, vocês estão muito bem-vindos. Agora, a seguir, nós vamos fazer uma apresentação das pessoas que vão participar da apresentação do que diz respeito à renomeação da Woodrow Wilson Elementary School.
Before we dive in, I want to explain how you can access live interpretation in either Spanish or Portuguese on Zoom. And we're also fortunate to be able to offer ASL interpretation. If you're utilizing ASL, please be sure to pin both of our interpreters, Noel and Julie, when they're visible on the screen.
Antes de comenzar, les quiero explicar cómo ustedes pueden acceder a la interpretación en vivo en español o portugués por Zoom. Estamos muy afortunados esa noche de ofrecerles a ustedes esa interpretación de señas. Y si usted está utilizando American Sign Language o el idioma americano de señas, asegúrense marcar a las intérpretes Noel y Julie cuando ellas están visibles en la pantalla.
Antes da gente começar, então eu quero explicar para vocês como é que vocês podem acessar a interpretação, né, a tradução, tanto para espanhol quanto para português no Zoom. Nós também temos sorte de poder oferecer o ASL, né, interpretação por sinais. Se você está utilizando esse tipo de interpretação, por favor, se assegure de marcar com PIN os nossos intérpretes, Noel e Julie, quando eles já aparecerem visíveis na tela.
Before I explain the interpretation, we're going to launch a brief language indicator poll. When this shows up on Zoom, please select your language preference.
Antes de comenzar la interpretación, vamos a empezar con una encuesta de preferencia de idioma. Cuando esa pantalla aparece, a favor de elegir su idioma preferido.
Tá, então, antes de eu explicar como é essa interpretação, nós vamos lançar aqui um pequeno painelzinho de indicação de linguagens, né? E quando você vai ver isso na sua tela, você, por favor, selecione a linguagem de preferência.
It's helpful for our interpreters to know if anyone is listening, but we'll interpret either way in the event that someone joins us late and would like to utilize this feature.
Para nosotros como intérpretes es útil saber si alguien nos está escuchando, pero también vamos a interpretar por toda la noche, por si acaso que alguien nos une un poquito más tarde y le gustaría utilizar ese atributo, ese sirve.
Então, essa tela é bastante útil para os intérpretes, para eles saberem se tem alguém realmente os escutando, mas nós vamos ter essa interpretação de qualquer maneira, porque pode acontecer mesmo que inicialmente esteja vazia a sala, alguma pessoa que fale esse idioma se junte a nós mais tarde.
When we turn the interpretation function on, you will be prompted to choose either Spanish or Portuguese by clicking the globe at the bottom of your Zoom screen. We'll save dedicated time at the end to review and translate Spanish or Portuguese questions submitted in the Question&A.
Cuando apretemos ese botón de interpretaciones, usted va a recibir una pregunta si prefiere el español o portugués por oprimir el icono del mundo que está en la parte de abajo de su pantalla de Zoom. Vamos a tener un poquito tiempo en el fin de la presentación para repasar algunas preguntas en español o portugués que están entregadas en el chat.
Então, quando esse sinal de interpretação for liberado, vocês vão selecionar, vocês vão escolher entre espanhol ou português, né, quem precisar, claro, clicando esse pequeno globo que aparece, né, o globinho da Terra que aparece no final da tela do Zoom. Então, nós vamos também reservar um tempinho no final de toda a apresentação para perguntas e respostas, né, que é uma sessão grande, e nós vamos separar esse tempinho para português e espanhol também.
All right, and could I have all of our interpreters introduce themselves and also have you invite attendees who wish to listen in Spanish or Portuguese to make their selections?
Hola, muy buenas noches. Me llamo Rosana y yo estaré brindando servicios de interpretaciones esa noche, por toda la noche, si ustedes prefieren escuchar esa presentación en español. Mucho gusto.
Boa noite, eu sou intérprete para inglês e português, meu nome é Marcos, e vocês, por favor, selecionem a opção português, caso desejem escutar toda a apresentação, perguntas e respostas em português.
All right, just giving everyone a minute to make their choices. And I'm going to do a quick test. So Rosanna and Marcos, can you give me a thumbs up if you can hear me? Oh. Rosanna, can you hear me? I see thumbs up from Marcos. All right. A few technical difficulties, everyone. Give us just a moment. Okay, got a thumbs up from Rosanna. One more from Marcos, make sure. Awesome. I think we're in business. Let's keep our test going. Can I hear both Rosanna and Marcos? See if we can hear you. Beeler, Associate Professor of History. From the Framingham History Center, Laura Rankin, Assistant Director. And of course, myself, Lara Villamot, here at the Framingham Public Library. And so with those introductions, I'm going to turn it over to Priscilla Souza to provide the official welcome and to present tonight's agenda.
Welcome all. It is a wonderful honor to be here. My name is Priscilla Souza. I'm a member of the Framingham School Committee. I am the first Brazilian to be elected to the Framingham School Committee, a former Framingham Public School student, and the chair of the Equity, Inclusion, and Diversity School.
Hi, and I'm also a Wilson alumna. So I've been on the committee that's been working to plan the last year with all the events going on in the country. There was a lot of attention brought to racial equity in our communities. So myself and a few other students started doing some research into the history of our country's leaders. We learned about some of the unfortunate things that President Wilson did that we aren't proud of because they don't represent our values or our diversity. So I talked with a few of my classmates, and we also connected with the Black Student Union at FHS to put our ideas together. We then took those ideas to our superintendent, Dr. Tremblay, and Principal Guimaraes of Wilson, and a few other administrators who put together our committee and began this project. We're so open to hearing student opinions. A conversation that started amongst a few students we've heard from many students because we want this to be a community project. There was actually a petition created by a student, Layla Rivers, with her father to change the name of the school. That petition reached over 1,500 signatures. So we've been seeing a lot of students weighing in on the topic, generate a new name that accurately represents who we are collectively. Teachers at Wilson set up to our Superintendent of Framingham Public Schools, Dr. Tremblay.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much. I'm so pleased to be here this evening, and just by offering some initial reflections. So Lara, I want to first commend you for the presentation tonight, and then generally these lessons that we've learned, since we closed school and last March and got used to working in a virtual environment as best we can. And I think that the silver lining in some of this is the ways in which we've made conversations accessible to our entire community, and I'm really awfully proud of that, and I'm just grateful to be among all of you this evening to make that possible and accessible to so many in our community. I'm also really pleased to have student voice and student agency as the driver behind this work. That's something I'm particularly proud of as a school superintendent. And I also had the opportunity to work and to appoint Principal De Moraes, who I'll be introducing in just a moment, but I wanted to offer those initial reflections. In the last year, and I do hope that this now is finding everyone well and in good health and with optimism and hope for what's to come, because as we plan to come back to school and reopen over a year later, there's excitement in the air, and this is part of that same excitement. This is part of that same journey. In this last year, there's been a lot of reflection to what this community can do when we come together. And my thanks to all who are involved in tonight's presentation, but also to help share in this journey for us. And I should tell you that Framingham for the last few months, over the last year really, but in the last few months in particular, has really been committed to this conversation around becoming an anti-racist school community. We have a long road ahead of us, and for us to simply denounce acts of hatred or racism is one important step we can take, but for us to actually make actionable, impactful change and to make a difference, something so bold as to changing the name of a school to reflect who we are and what our values are, again, is testament to what can happen.
Be in a school where we're going through Moraes. É prazer servo como diretora. I'm going to practice a little bit of my Portuguese. So Marcos, I'm giving you your small break now, and you can correct me at the end. So a little bit about Woodrow Wilson. You see this beautiful slide. I'm going to start off with the quilt you see on the left, which is an IB quilt. This was created by one of our third grade students in the year 2015. And that was when we first became an international PYP baccalaureate school, which basically means we're part of a prestigious program. And we have been endorsed as part of an elementary education where our students benefit from this primary years program that we have. And Woodrow Wilson, as you know, we're an extremely diverse and vibrant school made up of a large population of primarily Brazilians, but several other populations as well, and a huge, large population of English language learners. We, of course, value biliteracy, triliteracy, and even more. All of our students participate in biliteracy growth through the access of Portuguese, whether that is through dual language, a 50-50 model, a transitional bilingual program, a TBE model, or our SEI program where they take Portuguese one time a week. So our goal is from kindergarten to 5th grade, our students will graduate with not only English, but of course, Portuguese as well, and they will continue that journey. As a PYP IB school, our students experience what's called transdisciplinary learning, basically where they're making connections across and beyond all subject areas. So those connections our teachers make with them through curriculum. As you can see, that's the second picture in the middle of the presentation is our beautiful cafeteria. And within that cafeteria, you'll see large flags representative of our inclusivity of all cultures and respect for all of them. So very much fitting that we are thinking about very deeply at a time right now where there's lots of social pressure and things happening in the news that really ask one to reflect. The name Woodrow Wilson needs to be changed. And so the community is coming together on behalf of the renaming committee who's worked very hard to bring us to this point. I wanted to thank all of you for your support. I'm really looking forward to the journey ahead. We really need all voices to come together, support our school. and continue this work. And we hope to come out with a new name very, very soon. So on that note, obrigada pelo seu apoio. And I would like to introduce Ms. Laura Rankin, who is Assistant Director of the Framingham History Center. Thank you. Boa noite.
Thank you. All right, so tonight I'm going to share my presentation, District, Streets, and Luminaries, an Early History of Framingham Schools. I'm going to try to talk slow. All right, so I'm going to share a brief history of Framingham Public Schools from its very beginnings up to Woodrow Wilson Elementary, and then we'll dive into the background of the school. As we move through the slides, you'll begin to notice the way in which the town named schools, from districts to locations and street names, and finally, after Framingham's bicentennial in 1900, prominent people were honored. I also want to point out that there are an outstanding number of Framingham schools, and I've either purposely left out a school because I did not have an image for it, or there's a gap in my research. Framingham was incorporated as a town in 1700. Children at this time received brief informal education from their mothers at home. If a child, typically a boy, showed promise in their studies and families had the means, they were sent to cities to be educated. The true beginning of formal education in town was in 1706 with the appointment of Deacon Joshua Hemingway as schoolmaster. Since no schoolhouse had yet been built, he taught students in his home. And side note, Hemingway Elementary was named after this first schoolmaster of Framingham. The first schoolhouse was planned in 1716 to the west of the town's meeting house on Main Street. It was to be 22 feet long by 16 feet wide, with a fireplace for heat at both ends. It took nearly 3 years to complete. When the developing town outgrew both the schoolhouse and meeting house, the buildings were removed and the land became the old burying ground, or Main Street Cemetery. Next time you're walking the old burying ground, try to find this plaque. During the first 40 years of formal education, it was voted that the school year would be a 12-month schedule in which girls were taught in the summer and boys in the winter. It was in the 1700s, nearly everyone lived off the land and the boys needed to help their parents during the summer growing season. In those days, teachers were very strict. Students would be punished for merely looking out a window or for speaking when not called upon. It was also common to separate boys and girls in different parts of the room or by floors. As the center common and other areas of town were developed, the school system changed to the district system in 1749. This cropped image on the screen was from a painting that shows a little brick building on the right side of the center common, which was the center district schoolhouse. Directly across the common was this yellow brick schoolhouse behind a line of trees. It was known as the Academy Building. The Academy, a private institution established in 1792, taught its students modern subjects such as science and mathematics. The school welcomed all students upon equal terms, and it was the starting point for many of Framingham's most prominent citizens. Fast forward to the 1830s. This map shows us 10 of the 11 district schools. I added in the 11th one for you on the end. I won't go through all of them, but my next 4 slides will showcase them. This is one of 2 surviving schoolhouses from the 1800s. The bottom portion to the left was added in 1964 when the Friends meeting at Cambridge bought it. It is still in beautiful condition today. More research needs to be done on this schoolhouse, but it's located in Parks Corner, named for the Park families that lived in the area, which is now in Coburnville neighborhood. Known as Rice's End Schoolhouse number 11 for the Rice families that lived in the area, this schoolhouse was built in 1852 and it was converted to a single residence after World War II. It's located at 315 Old Connecticut Path near BJ's in the YMCA. Once this building was no longer a school in 1967, it was used as a Grange Hall and later a scout house. It sadly burned and was demolished in 1994 and is now the site of Knobscott Park, a pollinator garden established by the Framingham Garden Club. Jumping back a few years on our timeline, In 1833, town meeting members voted to build a new town hall called the Village Hall that would serve several purposes, including a school. The old one-room brick schoolhouse at the center was completely overwhelmed with 177 students, and the addition of 2 schoolrooms would alleviate this overflow. Here is one of the classrooms in 1856, led by Miss Lucy Ann Sanderson. It was 4 years later, in 1837, that the yellow brick Academy building was replaced with the stone building, pictured on the right, which still sits on the common today. 20 years later, Framingham's first high school, known as the Center High School, was built right next to the old academy on Vernon Street. The academy transitioned from a private school to public in 1851 and served as an elementary school until 1915, when it was turned over to the Framingham Historical and Natural History Society, now the Framingham History Center. It has been a museum ever since, and it houses many artifacts and archives. The Center High School was used for 49 years before it was moved to Pleasant Street and became Gordon's Clothing Store. Many Framingham girls and boys bought outfits for their school dances there. Today, it is the Coldwell Banker office. At the same time a high school formed at the center, Saxonville also gained a high school. This wooden structure was located just yards behind the current Stapleton Elementary. The main portion of Stapleton was built in 1922, and the wooden high school was demolished over several years. Lincoln Primary and Intermediate Schools were once located on the exact site of the main branch of the Framingham Public Library. This image, circa 1920, is looking north across Pearl Street at the 2 schools between the then Sanger and Lincoln Streets. It was later used for school administration and maintenance until it was torn down in 1977 for the site of the library. Jumping to the 1880s, there were 1,400 students spread out between 11 district schools, 3 grammar schools, and 2 high schools. The Hollis Street School served as an elementary school from 1880 to 1928, when the Memorial School replaced it. Lokerville School was established at 11 Howe Street in 1889 to keep pace with the growth of the town and the increased school population. It served grades 1 through 4 until it closed in 1933 when the school population decreased. It was used by a human service organization called Project Accept for a time. It was later demolished in 1980. Moving on to larger schools. Lawrence Street School, built in 1905, was originally used as an elementary school and then held special education classes for about 10 years. The building today is part of the high school as the Eugene Thayer campus. When the Center High School closed and was moved to Pleasant Street, the town needed to find land for a new high school. This building underwent 5 different name changes over the years. It was the Framingham High School from 1907 to 1958, then it became the Framingham Junior High. Just a few years later, in 1964, it was renamed the Lincoln Junior High, and then the Farley Junior High, also called the Farley Middle School, in honor of Judge Lewis Farley, late Justice of the 1st District Court of South Middlesex County. The final name change came in 1974 when Danforth Art took over the original part of the building and the town used the newer addition for offices. Due to the age of the building, Danforth Art had to make a quick move in 2016 and found a new home at the old Maynard School building on Vernon Street, where they have a beautiful museum and studio space today. The space that held the Center High School was not empty long. The Jonathan Maynard Elementary School was dedicated in 1915, and the architecture resembles that of Independence Hall in Philadelphia. The school was named in honor of one of Framingham's earliest citizens, Jonathan Maynard. Maynard was a soldier in the American Revolution and fought at the battles of Bunker Hill, Saratoga, Stillwater, and West Point. He also sat on a number of committees for the new town of Framingham and was even the first postmaster of the town. This is the main building of Stapleton that we know today. The school began as a junior high, but joined the elementary school family in 1958. Dr. Mary Stapleton was the first woman principal of the junior high in the 1950s, and when the school was expanded in 1980, it was renamed after the beloved educator. The Roosevelt Elementary School, named in honor of the 26th president, was located on Fay Road in Coburnville. It was called the most sightly of any of our school buildings at the time for its detailed architecture and location on a small rise. The school closed in 1980 and was used for senior housing for a time, but it was eventually demolished in 2002. All of this history brings us to Woodrow Wilson Elementary School. It was built in 1928 on Leland Street in South Framingham, near the Sherborne line, and opened to students on May 6, 1929. The school, as we know, was named after the 28th president, who died in 1924, which is significant to our story of the school. 1924 was the year the Sherborne annexation was signed. In 1923, the town of Sherborne voted 3-1 to transfer the northwest corner of their town to Framingham. The transfer went into effect on January 1st, 1925, and 565 acres of North Sherborne were turned over to the town of Framingham. There were three main reasons for this transfer of land. One, due to the industrial boom of South Framingham in the 1890s, there's an increased demand for new worker housing south of Beaver Brook Dam in the part of Sherborne called Sherborneville, later called North Sherborne. The red dot on the map is over the neighborhood of Sherborne Row to represent the location of Leland Street, Kendall Ave, and Beaver Street. As we can see, it's right next to the Framingham North Sherborne line, which was filling up with downtown Framingham workers at the time. Two, this new housing brought more and more families to the area, 600 in total, and Sherborne's old Beaver Street schoolhouse was far too small for the over 100 children in need of an education. Three, lastly, this part of Sherborne was 3 miles from the town center, and they lacked the funds to bring water system to this neighborhood. So for these reasons, the dotted line on this map became the new boundary of Framingham. When Framingham inherited the old Beaver Street schoolhouse, not only did it lack water, but it also had no electricity or blackboards. One of the first things Framingham did was build a modern brick school nearby. The old schoolhouse was converted into an apartment building in 1947. The red brick Woodrow Wilson the red brick Wilson School of 1929 was replaced in 1998 with a larger facility, also bearing the name of the 28th president. Soon there will be a new headline after this renaming. Maybe it will read, "Second chapter ends in Wilson history." There are so many more schools we could talk about, and so I've listed the remaining schools up to present day on my last slide. We'll take a few seconds to look at all the names. I'm not going to go over them all. But at this time, I'll introduce Dr. Lori Beeler, Associate Professor of History at Framingham State University, to share a bit about Woodrow Wilson, the president.
Sorry, we're going to pause for just 1 second, everybody, if that's okay. I have to do a quick switch on the Spanish interpretation. Rosanna, Bernardo said there was a little trouble, so I'm going to invite him to join. So everybody can just take a quick minute for water and we will get it set up for your section, Laurie. Just a couple minutes, really quickly.
Sure.
Thank you.
Should I begin?
Sorry, just one more second.
Of
Thank you
course. No
thank you for your
worries.
patience.
No worries.
Okay, we're just about there. Rosanna, I'm going to send you a chat. I'm going to have Bernardo jump in just for a couple minutes. There was like a technical difficulty. We were having trouble hearing you. So I'll chat with you in just a second, okay? All right, let me adjust the interpretation and we are going to be good to get started. Just 1 second, everybody. Thank you all for your patience. 1 second.
Sorry about that.
All right, I have made a change in the interpretation. Can we just check to see if it's working? Marcos, can you hear me? Bernardo, thumbs up if you can hear me. Okay, I can't hear you, so I think we're back up and running. I apologize. All right, I'm gonna go back to my slides and Dr. Beeler, you will be ready to pick up where we left off.
Sure.
Thank you so much.
Okay. All right, so I'm ready to go, right? We're good? All interpreters are go? Okay. So hi everybody. I'm just going to show you a couple of slides. I put together some images. I didn't want to give you a whole rundown of Woodrow Wilson's life. I wanted to really just show you what he was famous for, why they named the school after him in 1929, and then why we're re-examining his legacy and changing the name of the school. So I'm doing this from a historian's perspective, so bear with me as we go through the pictures. So do you mind clicking to the next one? Thanks. So Woodrow Wilson was famous for his actions as president of the United States after World War I. He was president longer. He was president from 1913 to 1921. But he's most well known for the 14 points, which you may have learned about in school, especially if you're still in school, and trying to develop the League of Nations. And he was celebrated. He really put the United States on the map of global diplomacy and was celebrated. And so I just wanted to give two examples of that. And one is the picture on the left is a cover for a sheet music for a song about Woodrow Wilson called The Whole World's Proud of You, held by the Library of Congress. You can actually go and play this song if you're up for it. But it shows the respect and the celebratory nature of the world at the time, 1919, and people were happy that the war was over as well. And then you can see in the parade in Paris during the Paris Peace Conference, Wilson was celebrated with a sign, a lit up sign across the road. So he was celebrated because he was considered a defender of democracy, meaning he tried to, at the end of World War I, establish a set of norms for Europe to help them create new democracies in countries that hadn't been democracies before. And he made a big splash and he was celebrated. But that's just one side of Wilson. So let's look at another side of him, if you wouldn't mind going. Thank you. He, at the same time, and people are complex, history is complex, at the same time he was also a staunch defender of segregation. There is a quote at the bottom, something that he said to civil rights activists, who we'll talk about in a second. Segregation is not a humiliation but a benefit, trying to appease people who came to protest his segregationist policies. So segregation is the separation of whites and black people in America. And under Woodrow Wilson, his administration created a segregated federal government. So all of the agencies and federal buildings across DC and around the country were suddenly, in 1913, when he became president, created into segregated sections. And so we had waiting rooms here in this picture from the Federal Health Services office building in DC, but every building in DC that was a federal government building had separate bathrooms, separate dining halls, separate waiting rooms, and so on. And in addition to that, the power structures of the federal government were influenced because you couldn't have a black, someone higher up, a black, over someone who was white underneath them. And so it also meant that many black civil servants working in the federal government were demoted and also physically separated, working in separate halls, separate wings of an office. It was really demoralizing and humiliating. At the same time, Woodrow Wilson had written about the South. He was a writer. He wrote about the Ku Klux Klan in very romantic language. He had a public showing of the film Birth of a Nation, which is a silent film where they basically celebrating the founding of the Ku Klux Klan. And he had, in 1915, a showing in the White House of this film. And the director of the film, Griffiths, actually included a quote of Woodrow Wilson's in the film. And this is here. I'm not going to read it, but it gives you a sense of Woodrow Wilson's perception of the Ku Klux Klan, an outright racist organization. And he was proud enough to show this in the White House. And you sometimes hear people say, well, those were the times, that's how people thought. But actually, no. Do you mind going to, do you want me to read the translation? So it says, and this is from Woodrow Wilson's writing, so this is what was put in the film. The white men were roused by a mere instinct of self-preservation until at last there had sprung into existence a great Ku Klux Klan, a veritable empire of the South to protect the Southern country. Which is disturbing to read aloud. So if we go to the next slide when we're ready, I wanted to show that it wasn't just the time. People weren't just racist, that there was outright resistance, protests against Woodrow Wilson's segregation policy and against the film, The Birth of a Nation. So it was the NAACP organized against both the president's segregation policies as well as the film in 1915, and this event when several activists, black activists, went to the White House to meet with Wilson. They met with him twice and outright told him that his segregationist policies were racist. And he got very defensive, especially the second time they came. And the first visit included a man from Boston, who I'm going to show you a little bit about in a second, William Monroe Trotter. And he wrote a newspaper, The Guardian, that really, in the 1910s and 20s, for black news, basically, in the black movement, the civil rights movement. And Ida B. Wells was also at the first meeting with the president. The first meeting, Wilson made a lot of promises, didn't change anything. And by the second meeting, their words were spoken between Trotter and Wilson got indignant and very angry. And this made the New York Times, this event. So it was not a secret that Wilson was a segregationist. It was not a secret that he was racist. It was known, but yet his legacy around the League of Nations still withheld and was strong. So I'm not surprised that in 1929, Framingham named the school after Woodrow Wilson because he was revered as a hero. But there was very clear awareness of his racist beliefs at that time. Would you mind going to the next slide? I just wanted to share 3 books that document the racism under Wilson, that historians, these are 3 prominent historians who've written about Wilson's segregation policy and the resistance against it. This is, the one in the middle is a book about William Monroe Trotter, and the book on the right as well is by a local as in Tufts University, historian. And they write so much, they've done tremendous research, and they're very well respected. So this is now, in the last 10-20 years, been fairly widespread, that it's been known and documented that Wilson was racist and held dearly his segregationist policies and outlook. So my last slide just says it's time. And I think this is my last slide. And the reason it's time is if you Google, as you can see in the image, if you Google Woodrow Wilson School name change, as I did, just to get a sense of how many there are, I only did a screenshot of these, but it's happening across the country, and it's happening for a reason. Princeton University, where Woodrow Wilson was president of the university, they've removed a famous institute with his name on it and a college with his name on it, and that was a very difficult and trying time for the university. But as the heading says, the university trustees, after doing tremendous research, interviewing historians, and they came up with the conclusion that Wilson's racist thinking, and I quote, and policies made him an inappropriate namesake for a school or college, Princeton's president said. So they changed it this summer. And it's really, I'm not surprised that our amazing students led a petition and pushed for this name change. And it really is time. It really is time. I don't believe I have another slide, do I? I think I might have. No,
You're
sorry.
good. You're good.
Sorry. So up next is Tiffany Maskell. Tiffany Maskell is a school committee member and liaison to the Renaming Planning Committee, and she will walk us through the process for renaming the Woodrow Wilson Elementary School. Do we need another minute for a break?
Maybe just 10 seconds.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much for allowing me to speak.
Thank you, Dr. Beeler.
Thank you, Dr. Beeler, and just a warm welcome to all of those who are here tonight who are learning, as I am, about this process for renaming Woodrow Wilson Elementary School. Tonight, I'm going to talk a little bit about the community voice, about planning, the planning committee, and about the student education that has happened in this process. This process, as many of my colleagues have already alluded to, was started by a community voice. A group of students brought this opportunity and important initiative to the school committee. And by the school committee then voted in a 9-0 vote to develop a planning committee to start looking at the process, and that was done in September of 2020. And then the planning committee began meeting in the fall with the goal of creating a community awareness and gathering community input. And that outreach began with the Wilson staff, followed by parents and students, and then offered it to the greater community. And now the whole Framingham community is involved in that process. Just a timeline of what has happened in this last year, starting in January. And I want to say and just give a shout out to the planning committee in general, because we've met every week since January. So I appreciate all of their efforts in this process. In January, we started an initiative to the Wilson staff and to the students where they explored the history. We raised awareness about the importance of social justice and anti-racism. And then in February, it translated to actually hands-on work within Woodrow Wilson. So our K-2 kids were able to study biographies and stories that tied into the justice theme, while the grade 3 through 5 students actually started brainstorming and researching name ideas. And that leads us to where we are today. So today we've, even by presenting this webinar, we are creating a broader awareness of the name change throughout the community. We now have a trilingual submission form that's in circulation, and that student education at Wilson is still continuing, which is amazing process that's going on. And that's a perfect segue to our next speaker, who is Heather Pflugrad. She is the IB PYP coordinator at Wilson Elementary. She'll be speaking to the student experience with all this and how the school has gone about providing both an educational experience and an inclusive practice, showcasing how we can make change in the world around us. So I'd like to welcome you, Heather.
Thank you, Tiffany. I am honored to be here today on behalf of our International Baccalaureate Primary Years program to really showcase the student voice. I love how we started this program with Liza Moreau. She actually was a former student of mine in 4th grade at Woodrow Wilson School, and I'm so proud of the student activism that led to this, this amazing initiative with Liza and with the petition that Layla started and the other students involved. So it's important to us to keep the student agency at the heart of this change, this name change. At an IB school, you can see the graphic there, that agency is core to who we are, having voice, choice, and ownership. And so that's what we're aiming to do. And as Tiffany was mentioning too, we're really proud of how we're making this process really inclusive and thoughtful. And how we've done that at our school is I've been collaborating with our library media specialist. I want to give a shout out to Amy Salinger, and our Portuguese world language teacher, Vanessa Austin. And in our library and Portuguese class specials, since January, the three of us have been co-teaching in our virtual world. Now we've got the concurrent teaching with all the students from kindergarten through 5th grade to get to first kind of educate why we're doing this, and now to get their voices and their opinions heard. So on the next slide, I'll do a brief overview of that process. So starting in January, the main question that was guiding our inquiry was, why are we changing our school's name? Like, why were we named this? Who was Woodrow Wilson? There's a tiny screenshot there. You can see that we were really inquiring into who he was, and everyone knows that he had some positive things, as we learned, and we learned about segregation too. And that led us to some really deep conversations with the students about, what is segregation and racism and social justice? Why is it important to be anti-racist? So we had those conversations with all of our students, and we heard their voices. There's a screenshot over February. We used a Jamboard, and they were writing what they thought social justice meant after we really dove into that. And then that led us to, well, what is our criteria for our school's new name? So what do we really want it to represent for who we are? And I'll talk about that a little more later. And so that leads us to now in the month of March. And this, like Tiffany was saying, is when we've been diving into our research. So what do I think is the best name for our school and why? And really justifying with reasons. And we tried to have a lot of agencies, so choices. Students could create posters or slideshows, or you'll see some pictures of these 3D models of schools with a new name idea, or a video. So we did all of that this month, and we're wrapping that up now. And the next step for student voice would be in April. We're hoping that we'll be able to include some student representatives on our narrowing down committee that will help to get all of the input and narrow it down to some finalists. So next, I want to dive into each of those guiding questions a bit more. So starting with the why are we changing our school's name? I really wanted to represent the student voice with this presentation to make sure that was really heard. So I have many of their questions that I'll read aloud just so we get those interpreted too. Because at an IB school, we really believe in teaching through inquiry. And you can see on the corners here, those are some of our IB learner profile attributes: being an inquirer, being open-minded, being a thinker, being principled. And so when we started with the question, who was Woodrow Wilson? We asked them, well, what do you know? What do you want to know? And they had questions like, well, what was Woodrow Wilson famous for? Or was Woodrow Wilson from Framingham? Or, well, why is our school named after Woodrow Wilson? He's not from Framingham. And then, well, did he do bad things? Did people know he was racist when the school was named after him? And this led, like I said, to our conversations about how can we right now take action to be anti-racist and support social justice. And students had a lot of connections to what's been going on in the world. Maybe they saw in Framingham some of the Black Lives Matter protests. We had some really great conversations about what that meant and how we're part of that change. And that leads us to talking about the criteria. So you'll see later today, I'm going to show you the Google form that has the criteria written out, and it's a little more wordy than this, some bigger words. So we tried to simplify the criteria for the students in 3 categories. So starting with our school's name, the new name should, we believe it should represent our beliefs and values as an IB World School. And we talked about what that meant. And it should support social justice. Our school's name can be named after an important person, place, historical event, organization, or idea. And that name can be connected to our city of Framingham, our state, our country, or the world. And then we discussed that there are some won'ts. Our school name won't be named after anyone who works at our school currently or in Framingham currently, and won't be named after anyone who is racist or treats people unfairly. I'm going to read, just for the translation, some of the quotes from the students, questions and inquiry that guided our learning together. So they were wondering, well, what are our beliefs and values as an IB World School? And we really looked into the mission statement and those IB learner profile attributes and explored that. What is social justice? And that's a tricky, complex word that we talked about a lot. What are some examples of names for other IB PYP, which means elementary, right, schools? Our schools in Framingham mostly named after people, places, events, organizations, or ideas. And we learned they're mostly named after people, aside from like Potter Road School. Can our school be named after our mascot, Wolfie? That was like the #1 question, because our mascot, Wolfie, is very much adored. And so we talked about that might go under the won't of not naming it after anyone who works at our school or in Framingham. So he'll still be here though. All right, so now on the next slide, just wanted to briefly discuss the research process. That research skills is one of the IB approaches to learning that's very important and connects to being an inquirer. And so in grades 3 to 5, we really focused on those research skills. And Amy Salinger, our librarian, taught the students about the Super 3 research steps of planning, then doing and collecting your sources and research, and reviewing based on the criteria. And we also really thought about, well, what are some good sources we can use as we're researching? And we really learned a lot from the Framingham Historical Center website, because we were curious about famous people or places or events from Framingham. And we explored different social justice activists. We researched in both English and Portuguese. We used Escola Britannica. And so that was a great learning experience. And that leads us to then for some students, and I think for a lot of students and probably adults, sometimes it's like, okay, well, who are the first people that come to mind? And we had some of those, you know, maybe some famous social justice activists that we all know of. And we wanted to push them a little further too. And so we did do some research using the Framingham History Center website and other websites to kind of introduce them to some biographies and some ideas that maybe have a local connection or global significance in history that maybe could inspire a name idea. And we also reminded them that our school doesn't have to be named after a person, and it could be after a concept. So we really talked a lot about those IB learner profile attributes that you can see listed here, such as being caring and open-minded. And now I'm going to show you some of their ideas. We actually created a school-wide, it's called a Padlet website, that we have all the students posting their ideas when attaching, whether it's their slideshow or pictures or videos. And so from all of those submissions, I've selected some from the younger grades that I'll show you first, and then from the older grades. All right, starting with the cute ones from kindergarten through 2nd grade. We had them do mini schools. So we had lots of recycled boxes, and Amy and Vanessa did a lot of wrapping of them to help. And they decorated with their school names, and you can see them putting some IB Learner Profile attribute posters on there. Some of the names they came up with, I think the green one is a kindergartner here. So Feliz Escola, or Happy School. IB Learner School was a popular one. Escola dos Amigos, our School of Friends. Caring Elementary School. Here's some more pictures of those. So that was nice to reflect on our values and who we are as a school. Oh, and there's Wolfie. Oh, there's another one, Escola IB Rua Leland. So IB School on Leland Street. All right, so now I'm going to show you some examples. I have 9 examples that I took from the Padlet. I chose these ones because they were either very popular, many people had these ideas, or they had some really persuasive evidence or reasons. So first example here is the Margaret E. Knight Elementary School. You can see her poster there. And so I think her name should be the name of our school because she was an inquirer and a thinker. She lived in Framingham, and she represents the IB traits too. And if you don't know who Margaret E. Knight is, she was a famous inventor, and one of her most famous inventions is the flat bottom paper bag. So when you go to the store and it opens up, thank you, Margaret Knight. Rosa Parks Elementary School, it's another one. Our school should be called Rosa Parks Elementary School because she stood up for the rights of Black people. And that was a very popular one. Global Elementary School. My idea for the school's new name is Global Elementary School because global is a word that means every person in the world is included. And we really connected that to being an international baccalaureate school. All right, we're going to do a few more, and then we'll wrap this up. So Martin Luther King Jr. Elementary School. In my opinion, Martin Luther King Elementary School is the best name for our IB school because he was a risk taker and open-minded. So they did a lot of reflecting on those IB learner profile attributes. This one in the middle here, I'm not sure if you all know what Harmony Grove was, but maybe you'll learn something new about Framingham. So there's a map there that you can see, maybe it says Farm Pond, and there's a green square next to it. And that was a park. Right now it's located near Franklin Street. And so this park was a place where people would gather for recreation, but also had many famous anti-slavery and suffragist rallies. So many famous speakers like Sojourner Truth spoke there in Framingham. So this one says, just like Harmony Grove was a place in Framingham where people could learn about human rights and believe they can make a difference, our school is also a place where students learn and reflect about human rights and social justice. And we have Bridges Academy. Ruby Bridges was not just brave at a young age, she was an inspiration for other kids who are of color. Ruby Bridges has a foundation under her name called the Ruby Bridges Foundation to promote tolerance and create change through education. All right, we have 3 more on the next slide, and then I could keep going all night, but I'll stop after these 3. So we have Crispus Attucks IB School. I chose this name because Crispus Attucks was a risk taker to escape slavery in Framingham. He was the first to die in the Boston Massacre, and he believed in freedom. Then in the middle, we have Framingham Community IB School. I think Framingham Community IB School is the best name for our school because we are a community and we work together to make the world a better place. That really ties in well to our IB mission statement. And last but not least, Ron Burton Senior Elementary School. I think Ron Burton Elementary School is a good name to call our school because he was a role model from Framingham. He never gave up when life was hard, and he helped kids from our community with the Ron Burton Training Village. Many of our students have attended and benefited from that. All right, so now I'm going to explain a little bit about how you can get involved. So we showed the student voice, and now we want to hear all community members' voices. So there's a few ways. Number one, we'll be putting in the chat box that we have a Google form. The form is open through the end of March, so we have about one more week, and we want as many name submissions as we can get. On the form, it has the criteria listed, so please review the criteria and contribute as many times as you want. You can submit all of your ideas. Next, one of the last questions on the form asks if you would like to volunteer to join the name submission committee to help narrow down the suggestions. There will be a couple of virtual meetings in April. So we're hoping to have representation from students, community members, families, staff. And lastly, spread the word. So please have a conversation with someone about what you learned tonight. And we'll be sharing a s'more newsletter that you could help share on social media to get the word and the form out there. And I believe the last slide has the links. So we'll also be putting these in the chat box. So the link to our school website has a page highlighting everything you've learned today about the process and how to get involved, as well as our s'more newsletter, and of course, the Google form. And that is all for our presentation part of tonight's event. And now we're going to go back to Laura, who's going to facilitate the question and answers with our panelists tonight. So thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Heather. And thank you to all of our panelists tonight for sharing your experience and your expertise with us here in the community. And I have to say, if I've learned nothing else tonight, I've learned that we have some really impressive kids in our community. So I'm excited to see where this goes. At this point, I also wanted to mention, I mentioned it at the beginning, but we are recording tonight's presentation. So as Heather said, spread the word and, let people who might be interested know that they can watch it on the Framingham Public Schools YouTube, share that video with everyone and invite them to share their ideas for a school name as well. We're going to be looking through the Q&A section to answer questions, and at the end we will reserve a few minutes for our viewers that are using the Spanish and Portuguese language options. Just as a reminder, this is an informational session. If you have any thoughts or wish to speak in a more public forum about the name change, you can virtually attend the May 5th school committee meeting. And of course, if you have any name change suggestions, we invite you to attend that, and also the Google form that Rochelle has just shared in the chat with you all. So I invite you all to put your questions in our question and answer section here. I'll be reading them out loud, and then the appropriate panelist will answer the question. So the very first question we have is, will there be a short list of possible names shared before the final selection? I think this might be perhaps Heather, is this you?
Well, I can tell you that we're putting together that school name narrowing down committee. I forget the exact title for that committee in April. And I think they will be discussing the process with how we're narrowing it down. And I think that's a great suggestion that maybe they'll consider to help have more input from the community before we give the final suggestions to the school committee. And in the end, school committee will make the final decision. So I think that's a great idea. So we'll see what they decide on that committee.
So we have along the same line someone asking about how to sign up for the name narrowing community when that time comes.
So on the Google form, which was in the chat, that's the final question if you're interested. And so first we're collecting all the names who are interested. And then, I mean, Priscilla, do you want to say more about how you'd reach out? Because I think you'll be helping to lead that, right?
Absolutely. Thank you so much. So later on this week, we should be, or early next week, we will be sending out a message to everyone who has indicated interest in participating in this narrowing down committee, which has been the unofficial name we've probably given. Very descriptive, but so yeah. So if you have indicated that you would like to participate, you will be hearing from us very soon.
I have a question from someone who submitted the name of Sarah Clays. She said they never received a reply. How do they know if their suggestion was received?
So when submitting a survey response, after you press submit at the bottom of the screen, a message should pop up that says your response has been recorded. And if that message came up, that's how you know for sure that your response was collected.
We have someone saying this is a great forum. They thank everyone for the hard work. They're suggesting there might be sentiment in the community from many longtime residents who say, why change it and why now? I know we kind of talked a lot about that throughout this presentation, but is there anyone who wants to expand just a little bit?
Do you want me to say something? I think, you know, I study the Holocaust for my field, and we talk a lot about commemoration and representation. And the name of a school that a child goes to every day is powerful. And if we know now that Wilson held these very racist views and enacted policies that were racist, I don't think we can look at our kids and say, we want you to go to a school that has that name. It's just wrong. So I think that's why now people are willing to face that.
If I may too, I would just add that this is also reflective of who we are as a district, our core values, what we represent as a school district. And I'm happy to share that. It's available on our website. When you read through the core values, our mission and our vision, you'll see very clearly that preserving this namesake is in sharp contrast to the very core values that we hold as a school district.
All right, I want to invite you again one more time to put any additional questions in the chat. I have someone asking, why is the final decision to the school committee and not narrowed down by the subcommittee, but voted on by the students to include their voice and choice and agency?
Tiffany, as chair of the policy subcommittee, do you want to answer that or should I?
Sorry, I was just trying to turn my microphone on. So under policy FF it is our guiding policy that states how the process of renaming a school is laid out. So for anyone who is interested, if you go to the FPS website and you go to the school committee, there is a link to our policy manual. And you can look up policy FF if you do have questions about the process, and that has been laid out for us in policy.
I think that question connects to the earlier question too about a way of getting some voice and narrowing down to. So maybe I will see what that committee decides, if there will be maybe another round of student voice if we have some contenders, and then in the end the school committee decides.
Absolutely, and I think that's an important point, Heather, that the narrowing down committee will be made up of students, of parents, of staff members, of school committee, and the district. So I think it's really important that we have all voices there at the table, as we are and as they are looking to narrow those names down for us.
All right, I'm not seeing any more questions immediately. Rochelle, do we want to offer an opportunity for our Portuguese and Spanish speaking attendees to ask any questions?
Yep, that would be wonderful, actually. So if Bernardo and Marcos, if you could take a look at the Q&A, and we'll give a moment in case any questions come in. Feel free to guide any viewers to the Q&A at the bottom of the Zoom screen, and we'll see if any questions come in. Thank you. There is a new question while we wait, Lara.
Yeah, I wasn't sure. I wanted to give space just in case, but I'll go ahead. Excuse me, I lost my place. There it is. Will the school committee in the final vote only consider what names are submitted from the committee?
I guess the short answer is yes. However, that is why it's very important to have such a collaborative process until we get there. If you have any desire to be a part of this conversation, please check that yes in that question at the end. We'd like to, hopefully in our quote unquote narrowing down community, we really want to, even if you can't participate all the way, we want to be as inclusive as possible.
All right, maybe one more minute to put any additional questions in our chat box in any of our languages. And if there aren't any more questions, then we will let you go for the evening. Thank you so much for your interest tonight, for attending with us, and for contributing some ideas to help us move the school forward. And also thank you to all of our community partners who came together to help create awareness for the broader community. Oh, we do have one more. I'm so sorry. If a student's suggestion is used for the new name, will the student be recognized?
I can take that one. Of course, we want to recognize our students, and if it comes from the students, we're working on a two-part plan, one on how to celebrate as we're ending and finishing, hopefully, the COVID stage, and how we can come together as a community. And of course, if the celebration entails a student enlisted name, we will do something very special for that student. So we will take ideas on what specialty that will be also. Maybe we can, Heather, add that to our curriculum. If a student's name, is chosen, what should their prize be at the end? So we'd love that. Absolutely.
Fantastic. All right, well, it is getting close to 8:30, so thank you again, panelists, for your expertise tonight. Thank you, audience, for being with us. And one more time, this presentation will be available on YouTube. The bit.ly links and to the forms to suggest your names to the school have been posted in the chat. And we look forward to hearing your suggestions and moving forward together in this process.